During the Qin dynasty, there was an old man named Jilin who lived in a small mountain village. Jilin was old and his hair was grey, but he always had a warm smile on his face. The children in the village liked him the most because he always brought candies to distribute to the children in the village. On festivals or sunny days, Jilin would wear a robe and carry a bamboo basket full of candies to the village square. His arrival always made the children cheer. Jilin would distribute candies to each child while smiling. Each child would hold sweet candies in his hands and his eyes would be filled with excitement. In return, the children would dance happily in front of Jilin. In the square, the children's laughter and dance steps came one after another. Some children used branches as musical instruments to beat, and some clapped their hands to the rhythm. The whole scene was full of vitality and joy. Whenever he saw the children dancing, Jilin would feel a warm feeling in his heart. He often said, "The children's smiles and dancing are my greatest reward." This tradition gradually became a custom in the village under the promotion of Jilin. On every important festival, the children would look forward to Jilin's candies, and the adults in the village were also infected by this cheerful atmosphere, and their hearts were filled with peace and joy. Over the years, Jilin's candies and the children's dances have become an indispensable festival scene in this small mountain village. Even though Jilin is no longer young, the children still commemorate him by dancing, passing on the sweetness of candies and the joy of dance to the next generation. Thus, Jilin's story has become a beautiful legend passed down from generation to generation in the village. An old man uses candies and kindness, and the children give him back with dance, warming the whole village for years. Many years later, Jilin passed away, and his candies and children's dances were gradually missed by the young people in the village. However, after Jilin left, some strange changes occurred in the village. One day, some wild dogs began to appear in the village. These dogs came from all directions, with messy hair and strange eyes. They were not ordinary wild dogs. The villagers found that whenever the children in the village gathered in the square to dance during festivals, these wild dogs would also quietly approach, not barking or biting, but just wandering on the edge of the square, as if waiting for something. The children were initially afraid of these wild dogs, but there was a little boy named Likun who was the bravest child in the village. Once, when Likun was distributing candies, he noticed that a wild dog approached the candy basket and stretched out his tongue to gently lick a candy. Likun was not afraid, but thought the dog was very interesting. He carefully handed the candy to the wild dog, who licked the candy and then left happily, wagging his tail. Then, more and more wild dogs began to follow suit. Every time during festivals, when children distributed candy, the wild dogs would surround them and lick the candy scattered on the ground. Strangely, every time the wild dogs licked the candy, they would jump happily with the children as if they were injected with energy. Although they can't really dance, they express joy in their own way, and their tails keep wagging, as if celebrating this sweet moment. Gradually, the villagers are no longer afraid of these wild dogs, and some children even began to deliberately bring more candy, specifically for these wild dogs licking candy. During every festival, there are not only children dancing in the square, but also a group of wild dogs happily licking candy and jumping, which have become a unique landscape in the village festival. Over time, the wild dogs licking candy have become part of the village festival. The villagers began to believe that these wild dogs are Jilin's souls guarding the village and participating in the children's celebration in their own way. Every wild dog licking candy seems to carry Jilin's smile, making the tradition of this small village more special and warm. From then on, candy, dancing and licking wild dogs together wrote the village's joyous festival chapter, which was passed down from generation to generation year after year. Soon after, a strange stranger appeared on the edge of the village. He had a long, scraggly beard that swayed in the wind as if it had its own life. He wore a shabby coat and had a gloomy look. Most strikingly, he drove a dilapidated train that had no tracks but could mysteriously shuttle through the streets of the village, making a creaking noise. The train was unlike anything the villagers had ever seen. It was obviously made in a foreign country, with rust all over its surface and creaking wheels, as if it would disintegrate at any time. The villagers were all very uneasy, especially when they saw the train, which always felt that it was out of tune with the peaceful atmosphere of the village. What made them even more uneasy was the evil long beard of the train driver. He never smiled, his eyes were cold, and he was always peeking around, as if he was secretly planning something. The stranger's name was Ko. He never talked much to the villagers, but he would drive the dilapidated train around the village every night. The children in the village instinctively avoided him because his appearance was always accompanied by cold wind and oppressive atmosphere. Cole would stop the train from time to time and let out a low laugh, as if mocking the tranquility and joy of the village. One day, Cole stopped the train at the edge of the village square when the children were dancing and the wild dogs were licking candy. He stared at the children's cheerful dance with an evil smile on his face. "Your candy festival is just a trick to deceive yourself," he said in a low and hoarse voice. "These dogs are just greedy creatures, and your laughter will be replaced sooner or later." The villagers gradually distrusted Cole, especially his strange foreign train. When the train wandered in the village, it always made an ominous sound, and sometimes even emitted a strange smoke that made people feel dizzy. Some villagers began to suspect that Cole had a conspiracy and believed that the train he brought would bring disaster to the village. One night, Cole's train made a louder noise than usual, and the villagers hid at home and dared not go out. However, a few curious children sneaked out of their homes to see what secrets this evil train had. Likun was among them. That night, the children found Cole standing in the middle of the square, holding a dark and strange stone in his hand, as if chanting some spell. Just as Cole was about to carry out his evil plan, the wild dogs in the village suddenly gathered and surrounded him. They began to lick the wheels and rust of the train frantically, and the licked parts began to melt slowly. Cole looked at the scene in front of him in surprise, obviously not expecting the power of these wild dogs. "This is impossible," he shouted in horror, trying to stop the dogs. But it was no use. The wild dogs seemed to know that they were fighting against an evil force. They united and licked every worn-out part of the train. Finally, as the train completely collapsed, Cole lost his power. His long beard quickly shriveled and broke like a withered vine, and the whole person disappeared in a cloud of black smoke, as if he had never existed. Since then, the village has returned to peace, the children continued to dance, and the wild dogs continued to lick candy. The train wreckage was completely cleaned up by the wild dogs, and the villagers believed that it was these seemingly ordinary dogs that protected the peace of the village. Jilin's spirit continued to be passed on through the actions of the children and the wild dogs, and the villagers never encountered a villain like Cole again. But they knew that as long as the candy and dance were still there, the village would always be protected by this innocence and joy. Just as Cole's train is about to completely collapse, Cole realizes that they need to do something to defeat this evil villain once and for all. Although the wild dogs are working hard to lick the rust off the train, Cole's magic is still there and his spell seems to be still casting a curse on the village. Koan suddenly thought of a very smart and happy little monkey in the village named Guogua. Guogua always plays with the children and imitates their actions. He especially likes to do somersaults and steal candy. Koan knew that if anyone could use a little trick to deal with Cole, it must be this flexible monkey. Koan hurried to the entrance of the village, found Guogua, and muttered to him the plan. Guogua quickly understood the mission, with a cunning light in his eyes. He jumped onto Koan's shoulder and the two sneaked back to the square together. At this time, Cole was still trying to control the wreckage of the train, trying to use his last strength to cause a disaster. He didn't notice Guogua quietly moving nearby. Koan commanded Guogua, signaling it to approach the dark stone in Cole's hand, which was the source of his spell. Guogua jumped to the top of the train while Cole was not paying attention, pretending to be a curious wild monkey, jumping and making funny noises, which attracted Cole's attention. Cole frowned, glared at the monkey, and waved to drive it away, but Guogua ignored it and jumped closer and closer, finally approaching Cole's head. Just as Cole reached out to grab Guogua, Guogua suddenly turned over deftly, snatched Cole's dark stone and held it in its little claws. Cole shouted angrily in an instant, "No! That's the source of my power. Give it back to me." Guogua ignored Cole's roar and jumped back to Koan at a very fast speed. Koan picked up a candy and quickly stuffed it into Guogua's claws as a reward. Guogua jumped happily, completely ignoring Cole, who was furious. At this moment, Cole, who had lost the stone, could no longer control the wreckage of the train. The train began to shake violently, and rust and parts fell off its surface. Cole wanted to step forward to stop it, but it was too late. Boom! With a huge explosion, Cole's train exploded completely in the square. Sparks flew, black smoke filled the air, and Cole was knocked to the ground by the powerful impact. With the destruction of the train, Cole's beard was burned like dead grass, and his spell disappeared with the destruction of the train. When the smoke of the explosion dissipated, the square returned to calm. Cole could no longer cast magic, and his long beard was gone. He limped to his feet and realized that he had completely lost. He glared at Koan and the happy monkey angrily, but at this time he had lost all his strength. Cole finally fled the village in a hurry and never came back. And Guogua became the hero of the village. Children laughed and danced for it, and wild dogs licked the scattered candies to celebrate this victory. Since then, the village has never encountered any more evil threats. The candy festival has become more lively, and Gogo will appear at the village celebrations from time to time, imitating the children's dances and becoming everyone's favorite. The villagers know that it is this happy monkey and his little tricks that have helped them get rid of Cole's evil power forever. Epilogue. Years later, the village is still a place full of laughter and warmth. Children continue to dance, wild dogs lick candy, and the happy monkey Gogo has become the eternal legend of the village. The old people in the village often gather together to tell the story of the villain Cole who once threatened the village, the train explosion and the final victory. Every time the story talks about Gogo, the children always laugh the most happily. They compete to imitate the monkey's wit in stealing stones and Cole's embarrassed escape. Gogo also jumps to the center of the square from time to time, making funny movements, causing bursts of laughter. As time goes by, the reputation of this small village gradually spreads. People no longer remember it only because of Jilin's candy and children's dances, but because it once defeated an evil villain. Travelers from all directions will come here specifically to see the square that was once crossed by the train, listen to the legend of the wild dog, and see Gogo's mischief with their own eyes. The village festivals became more grand, and every year when the children danced in the square, Gogo would always become the most popular star, infecting everyone with his joy. The sweetness of candy and the joy of dancing have been deeply rooted in every corner of the village. And Cole, the villain who tried to conquer the village with a curse, became a warning in the stories told to the children in the village. His evil train has long turned to dust, leaving only the lesson: nothing is more powerful than innocent joy, and nothing can defeat darkness more than candy, dance, and friendship. As the days passed, Gogo still jumped happily, and the village continued to prosper in peace and joy. People firmly believed that as long as the monkey was there, as long as the children were still dancing, evil would never be able to invade this village. 6 months later, Gogo contracted rabies from one of the wild dogs. All the children trusted him, so they did not run away. Gogo beat all the children and they cried a lot, and many of them died. Policemen were called and then went around town shooting all the monkeys. Monkeys were banned from the village after that day.